The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The traffic nightmare in Chicago and its suburbs costing you time, money, even harming your health. What can be done to fix it?
Need a little extra holiday cash? We'll show you how to turn your household junk into profit.
And body cameras for Chicago cops are hitting the streets. Will they protect the public or police? Stay with us for these stories and more tonight on In the Loop.
Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Nationwide, drivers spend more than 4 billion hours stuck in traffic every year, and Illinois ranks, you guessed it, near the bottom in terms of traffic delays.
In the Chicago area alone, commuters spend more than 70 hours a year on the road. They also pay the highest cost in the nation for that congestion. But
the stress of all that terrible traffic is not the only headache the drivers have to deal with.
Monday, December 1st at 7:47. Let's go to work.
5 days a week, Tabitha Rhodes leaves her home just after sunrise. The sales assistant spends more than 2 hours a day driving round trip from her home in north suburban Zion to her office in Evanston.
That limits my time to study. It limits my time with my family, with my boyfriend.
Rhodes drives 35 miles each way. But the stop and go traffic means she is often driving at a snail's pace.
If I leave at 8 or 8:15, the traffic is worse. Usually it takes more like an hour and 15 to an hour and 20 minutes to get here, depending on the later I leave, the later it potentially is. So I have to leave at 7:45 to make sure that I'm at work by 9 o'clock.
Tabitha has plenty of company among road warriors in the Chicago area. A 2011 study by the Texas A&M Transportation Institute found commuters in the city, suburbs, and northwest Indiana spend an additional 71 hours behind the wheel every year because of traffic delays. That's 37 more hours than the national average. The report ranks Illinois as the fourth worst state for rush hour congestion. And Chicago's critical role as a center of rail transportation, the only American city that serves all 6 major freight lines, makes matters even worse, according to Chicago Tribune transportation reporter John Hilkovich.
There's tons of rail traffic, over 33,000 rail cars a day coming through the Chicago area. That in itself creates all sorts of congestion. A lot of those rail cars are fed by trucks on our highways and interstates that are shifting cargo on and off the trains. And truck traffic does contribute to a big part of the problem.
All that leaves the Chicago area with highly congested streets and highways, including the newly renamed Jane Byrne Interchange. This area, formerly called the Circle Interchange, is where the Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Dan Ryan expressways meet Congress Parkway just west of downtown. The Federal Highway Administration regularly calls this section one of the worst traffic bottlenecks in the nation, and drivers pay a high price as they lose on average $1,500 a year on fuel and time spent on the road. Hilkovich says the impact is even greater on the economy.
Congestion in the Chicago region is costing the local economy about $8 billion a year. That's in lost time to businesses, to drivers, wasted fuel. About $2.3 billion of that total is due to truck congestion.
To help get traffic moving, the Illinois Department of Transportation has begun a $475 million overhaul of the Jane Byrne Interchange.
It's been largely untouched since it was built in the 1950s and 60s. So what this will do will help improve capacity, traffic flow, efficiency, safety in that interchange. But it's something that should probably be felt throughout the entire system, if not the entire Midwest.
The high cost of Chicago traffic jams reaches far beyond lost time and money. Commuters also pay a price in their own health, according to Rush University Medical Center physician Patricia Normand.
this can be a contributing cause to disease, such as coronary artery disease, obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure.
So what can drivers do to avoid the harmful impact of traffic?
Do things that will take your focus of attention off the traffic. For some people, it might be putting on relaxing music. For other people, it might be doing some deep breathing.
After 4 months of making her daily commute, Tabitha tries to make the best of all her extra time on the road.
It's a pain, but I'd rather have a job than not a job.
And we're now joined by Yona Freemark, Project Manager for the Metropolitan Planning Council, and welcome.
Thank you.
So we know there's a correlation between gas prices and traffic. We're seeing gas prices plunge now. Is that going to make Chicago traffic even worse?
You know, the good news about decreasing gas prices is really that people's pocketbooks are going to have more money for other things. So that's going to be great for customers, for people throughout the economy. On the other hand, we are likely to see more traffic as people find it easier to drive around because they're able to spend more.
In terms of solutions, one of the things legislators in Springfield have just done is to increase the speed limit on the tollways up to 70 miles an hour, even in metro areas, unless the individual counties object. Is that going to help?
Well, it might do a little to speed up traffic, but the reality is that increasing the speed limit has some negative impacts as well. It will increase the amount of pollution being released by cars, and it may actually increase the number of fatalities on the road. So we need to be careful about where we increase the speed limits and how.
The two perennial trouble spots seem to be the Eisenhower Expressway and the Stevenson Expressway. Looked at these studies year after year, they show up as the most congested. Is there any hope on those two particular freeways?
So the reality is that today we have a fundamental problem, which is that we can't do much to expand our highways because, as you know, there are neighborhoods that are right next to those roads. So we're not going to be able to do too much to expand them beyond maybe one lane in each direction. What we've talked about at the Metropolitan Planning Council is implementing something called congestion pricing, which would be a lane in each direction on those highways that would be priced at a certain rate, and people would be able to choose to pay that rate to be able to get a speedy commute into the city or into other parts of the region.
So you're talking about a toll road or a partial toll road only applying to one lane on those highways?
Yes, effectively it would just be a lane where you can choose to be able to pay the toll, and it would allow you to get out of the congestion. For those who don't want to pay, they can stay in the regular lanes.
And how is that going politically? I mean, is there a lot of resistance here in Chicago to that?
Well, I think that there was a positive reaction to the changes that the tollway made a few years ago with the increase in the toll rates because people knew that they would get a benefit out of it. And what we've been trying to advocate is the idea that people understand that if they're willing to pay a little bit, they'll be able to get a lot. They'll be able to get a more smooth ride into work. They'll be able to get a less congested commute. And people, I think, will respond positively to that.
The other thing we've seen in the Chicago area is a proliferation of red light cameras and speed cameras. Have they made any quantifiable impact on traffic?
Well, what they have done is cut down on the number of people speeding through lights. And that's been really beneficial in terms of preventing the kind of fatalities that we saw with people running into each other at intersections. And the reality is that that's a really very important thing that's much more important than reducing the amount of traffic on the roads. It's about saving lives.
And the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, has been pushing very hard for more bike lanes. Has this had any kind of impact on vehicular traffic, cars and trucks yet?
Well, what's been interesting is that over the past 10 years, despite the traffic that we see on all our roadways, the amount of cars that have been driving along our roads has actually not increased. It's actually been rather stable, despite the fact that the region as a whole has gained in population. What's happening is that in places like Chicago, but also in certain suburbs, people are moving into other types of transportation. They're moving onto bikes in certain places, but they're also moving into our transit lines. And that's why we see record amounts of congestion and traffic on, for example, the Red Line, which goes through the center of the city of Chicago, but also on our Metro line into Union Station.
One of the most controversial projects has been this proposed Ileana Expressway, which would connect Interstate 55 south of the Chicago suburbs to Interstate 65 in Indiana. Advocates say it would reduce congestion, especially for trucks in the Chicago area. Good idea?
So the Metropolitan Planning Council conducted a very extensive study on the impact of the Ileana based on information that was provided by the Illinois Department of Transportation. And unfortunately, we've come to the conclusion that because of the fact that the Ileana would be tolled, as compared to the surrounding roadways which are not tolled and will not be tolled, at least based on current plans, the Ileana will not be able to reduce the congestion significantly at all in the region. And it will come at a very high cost, about $1.5 billion. So in our estimation, that cost-benefit ratio suggests that we should not actually build the Ileana. It will not provide the traffic relief that we're expecting for our region.
And building highways, you say, is not always the answer to reduce traffic.
Well, one of the interesting things about building highways is that they inevitably produce more traffic, because when people are able to see new lanes of traffic available to them, they respond by driving on them. It's an interesting effect.
On that note, we have to wrap it up. Thank you very much. Yona, thanks very much for your help today. Body cameras for Chicago police and the race for mayor begins to take shape. Those stories are trending tonight.
Chicago police will start wearing body cameras. The pilot program, set to begin in 60 days, comes on the heels of unrest in Ferguson, Missouri, after the police shooting of Michael Brown. Cameras will record officers and citizens during stops.
I think that's a good investment.
Well, it's a good idea. I mean, if you can afford them, obviously it's going to be a big cost to the city. But let's face it, it solves the problem of what really went on.
More money for some city workers. The City Council approved gradually boosting Chicago's minimum wage to $13 an hour by 2019. The first increase to $10 an hour takes effect next July.
I actually think that this is a fair deal for people that work hard. I mean, we already know that in the city of Chicago, really minimum wage does not even pay you rent.
What does this pay raise mean for workers, businesses, and a similar measure looking to raise minimum wage statewide? The race for Chicago mayor takes shape, and with it, questions about how Rahm Emanuel is raising campaign cash. Some Chicago aldermen, including one looking to unseat the mayor, want an investigation. And meet your new neighbors. Scientists say coyotes, thousands of them, are now living in Chicago, spotted in neighborhoods from Rogers Park to Lincoln Park to Woodlawn.
Joining us to weigh in on these stories are David Vigiano, Media Director for Alpatac Marketing, journalist and producer Sylvia Perez, and Adeshina Emanuel, reporter for the Chicago Reporter. Hello and welcome to all of you.
Hello. Good morning.
In the wake of Ferguson, we've seen the President ask Congress for more money for body cameras to be worn by police, and Chicago will start its pilot program within the next few weeks. David, is this a good idea?
Absolutely. It's just an experiment, and I think we need to just check this out and see how it's going to work. There's a lot of questions, though. It seems rather big and bulky, and I wonder what the cost is going to be. What are we going to do with all that video? Does it stream live? Do you have to turn it on so you can be selective? Is it easily breakable? Can it just be smashed? There's a lot of questions here, but I can't imagine that it's not going to be something good to check out.
Sylvia, will the video make a difference?
I think it will make a difference. We've had so many issues over the years where people have talked about how there has been police abuse. If you go back to Rodney King, we've all seen that video of the beating going on there. Now let's go back to present day. Just Eric Garner this week, that verdict came down, no charges filed. Yes, somebody else was taping during the Garner case, but there was not a camera. Had there been a camera, they're either wearing them on their lapel or on their chest, looking straight at the person who they were dealing with, it might show a whole different side to the story. And I think that's what these cameras are going to do. And interestingly enough, I've talked to a few of my Chicago police officer friends, and they seem to be for it too. I think David, you brought up some good issues about storage and you know, when do you turn it on, when do you turn it off? I think that those things can be worked out. I think it's going to be a very good thing.
Now, the events in Ferguson and in Staten Island put a harsh spotlight on the mistrust that exists in some communities with the police. Ade, will these cameras make a difference? Will the technology help or hurt?
I think it helps. It's not a silver bullet, of course, in terms of like issues of trust between police and specifically, you know, communities of color. That's a relationship that has to be improved, you know, in more ways than one, certainly. But, you know, this helps in terms of, you know, showing some accountability. It's a good thing that it's something the CPD is coming forward with. It shows at least that they agree that It's important to have an independent monitor in these situations for the officer's sake and for the civilian's sake. You know, it goes both ways.
And I think what's good is that it could help in a preventative way. It could help keeping some minor incidents escalate into bigger incidents if both parties know that they're on camera.
And we all know they're not the cure-all, but let's be honest here, everybody. You know what these cameras are? These cameras are about public trust of the police department. It's about, we've been questioning our police officers, and even the police officers are saying people are questioning us. This is about community, police relations, and it's about public trust. And that's really what the bottom line with these cameras are. So I think they're going to be good for both sides.
They've gotten a lot of support from disparate factions, the ACLU, the NAACP, some police unions. But Ade, what about privacy?
You know, this is an issue that actually some activists with the Black Youth Project here in Chicago brought up to me that, you know, they think it's a great idea, but they have concerns about, they have some civil liberty concerns. You know, they want to make sure that people know they're being recorded, that, you know, what happens with that information. For some people, just as a principled argument, it becomes sort of an advancement of, you know, state surveillance, and there are some people who just by that principle feel a little bit uneasy. But I think the question of what happens with the data, how it's used, you know, I think that's like a big question, and how officers, like, you know, what goes into their protocol for, you know, if they arrest or if they walk up on someone, should they immediately say, hey, this is being recorded?
They should, absolutely they should. I think that has to be the first thing it said is, just so you know, we're recording here. And that's what some people are concerned about, is if they're questioning citizens, are they going to be saying, oh, I'm being recorded, maybe I'm not going to give them all the information that I need to or that I should tell them about.
I wanted to add too, though, that, you know, we speak about this not being a silver bullet. When you talk about, you know, concerns about police brutality or excessive force, there are more systemic problems around how these things are investigated, when charges or indictments, you know, do or don't come about, and who's doing the investigating. The police are investigating themselves. If you have a county prosecutor or somebody who works hand in hand typically with the police, it becomes sort of a situation where I think there's still an issue of public trust is in a sense of, is there bias? Is this a disingenuous investigation here? And we've had situations where there's footage of misconduct, and it doesn't necessarily lead to the city or the powers that be necessarily cracking down.
But where was the footage coming from? Was it coming from the police officers, or was it coming from somebody else? Because there have been cases where people have recorded. There was an incident a few years ago where a bystander recorded from a balcony apartment watching somebody who was approaching a police officer, and they said that this man was unarmed, but these police officers, they were the Rialto, California ones, happened to have a body camera on, and it was very clear from that body camera that that man was actually pointing a gun at the police officer. You know?
Well, it certainly helps. Just
it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds.
Definitely.
We'll switch gears now to minimum wage. This week, the City Council raised the minimum wage in Chicago from $8.25 to $10 next July and $13 by 2019. Ade, was this the right thing to do?
You know, there's lots of potentially positive and potentially negative aspects of this. I'll start with the negative. Alderman Tunney over in Lakeview at the 44th Ward, he mentioned he's a small business owner himself. He owns an Ann Sather restaurant chain. He mentioned just, you know, this concern about making it harder on the small business folk, you know, and then some aldermen who have wards that border some of the suburban areas, they worry about, well, will I literally lose a business across the street? Because, you know, there's this concern about the labor costs. But on the other side of it, alleviating issues of poverty, putting more money in working class, you know, folks' pockets and helping their bottom lines. These are things that I think there's net benefits for the whole of society in other ways. It's something that there are these positive and negative things, though. I think I forget what the number is about how many people will be affected, like what, over 400,000.
A third of the city's workforce.
Right.
And I'm wondering, is $13, David, enough to make a difference?
Listen, it's absolutely necessary, and it will make a difference. The National Coalition for Low-Income Housing has estimated, right, for a two-bedroom, fair market price for a two-bedroom apartment in Chicago is $900. Now, at this rate, at $8.25 an hour, you have to work 2.5 full-time jobs in order to pay your rent and not pay more than 30% of your income. We have to change that. Now, it is scary that for these small businesses, I know, and going up more than 50% over 5 years is a lot to add to their burden. And maybe we could have done it a little bit slower, but I think it's really important. And I think we have less issues now about whether we're going to lose businesses now that the whole state is going to go up to $11, so the discrepancy is different, and Chicago is more expensive to live, so it really is necessary.
Sylvia, what happens now to that state measure?
Well, I think that you talk about that state measure. That whole thing is very interesting. I think that's the most interesting thing that has come out of this minimum wage hike, is that Chicago, aka Rahm Emanuel, decided we were going to go ahead and do it without waiting for the state measure, because there might have been something in the state bill that said it was going to be a statewide issue and individual, municipalities would not be able to do this. So Mayor says that's the reason he stepped in and said, let's have this special meeting, let's vote, let's do this now. Let's not wait for the state, because they may prevent us from getting the hike that we want. So that brought in a whole nother can of worms. And some people are saying, as a result of the mayor's move, that this state issue may take forever to go through now, because they're looking at how much we're going to be increasing our minimum wage over time. So that just kind of threw a whole wrench in the plans, I think.
Well, some have said, too, that the mayor's pre-election push for a minimum wage and making an end run around the state has become an effort on his part in an election year.
Absolutely.
To shed his Mayor 1% image.
Right.
Will it change his image with voters, do you think?
Well, I think that Mayor 1% label is something that's very, I wouldn't call it a dark cloud. It's something that's hung on him, very often by opponents of his. And I don't think that this in itself will necessarily wipe that away. I think, we have a topic coming up, in terms of his money for his campaign and how he gets to who he's getting it from. That stuff like that, you see, I think there's still enough points of criticism for his opponents, with stuff like that in his background. I mean, but this shows on Ben Jarofsky over at The Reader, he sort of said that, this is part of Rahm's move to the left, as he calls it, between some affordable housing things and this, it's definitely
this is a vote getter.
Let's
admit it here. That's what that is. It is a vote getter.
Yeah, let's talk about that race.
Right?
I mean, some concern about where the mayor is getting his campaign money from. One place in particular manages some city pension money. One alderman who's running against the mayor calling for an investigation. Is this sour grapes or something more, David?
Well, there's definitely sour grapes, but you have to do whatever you can to combat that. He's getting lots and lots of money. And there is this funny gray area. I mean, is the money coming from the city pension funds? But no, it's filtered through this private equity firm. So is this a loophole that's okay? So it's a gray area and it should be investigated. He's getting lots of money. But I do think that his opponents are looking for anything they can to stop this influx of money that they can't compete with. Rahm already has the name recognition, and neither one of them really is, as long as they've both been around, they still don't have that good name recognition. And with all that money behind Rahm, I mean, they're just going to sink.
Among the front runners, we have Cook County Commissioner Jesus Chuy Garcia. He's got 63,000 signatures, not a whole lot of cash. Alderman Fioretti also running. Sylvia handicapped this race.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because the game has changed several times already when Karen Lewis stepped aside. But now, sure, Chuy Garcia is someone who doesn't have huge name recognition, but you know what he has now? He has Karen Lewis on his side. She was just out last night, her first public appearance in Chicago, and she was basically stumping for Garcia. And I think that that's going to be huge, because the bottom line, in order for mayor to win this race, he has to get 50% of the vote.
Plus one.
Plus one. So if Fioretti and Garcia can do a split, they're going to help each other, so that probably in this case, it could be Garcia who wins, because he's getting, I'm talking about the split between he and Fioretti, who wins because he's getting the help from the person who people were really interested in and very disappointed that she had to pull out, obviously, for health issues.
And I think if it becomes a runoff between Garcia and Rahm, that's going to be a good fight.
That's a whole different ballgame. That would be exciting to see, because we haven't had a really exciing mayoral race in Chicago for a long time.
Yeah, and money's starting to come in for Chuy already. I mean, he got backed by healthcare
and the SEIU.
Yeah, and they're already talking about the teachers union.
Okay, we're going to shift quickly to our last topic, our new neighbors in the city, coyotes. The newest city residents. Scientists say there are at least 2,000 of them. We saw the video of them going up to people's doorsteps all over. How surprising is this, Ade?
You know, I grew up in Uptown, and I covered Uptown for DNA Info as well. And every now and then you get these, on message boards for the neighborhood, you'll see coyote sightings. Be careful with your pets. People are concerned that the coyotes are going to come by and, gobble up their pets or whatever. So I'm not that surprised, but I'm surprised that this is such a thing. Like, I don't really know that much about it, to be honest with you, but
We're talking about it, right?
Yeah, and, you know, being a city boy, I mean, part of me is happy to have a little bit of, you know, wildlife in the city. So to speak.
If you don't have a small pet.
Even coyotes know Chicago's a great place to live. Yeah. But my concern, I heard that they're coming up to Rogers Park. I have 2 small dogs that are 10 pounds each, you know, and I let them out in the backyard and run around, and I get worried, you know. They've
And can anybody really recognize a coyote in the dark? You know? I mean,
let's hope so. Well, keep your dogs inside. We'll leave it at that. We'd like to thank our guests, David Vigiano, Sylvia Perez, and Adeshina Emmanuel. Today, we are taking a look back at a story with new value this holiday season. This is the time of year when most of us could use some extra cash. If you had the energy and a little muscle, here's an unconventional way to literally haul in some gift money.
But yeah, I don't mind doing a little work for a little money. That's where I helps to have a good back.
Welcome to the afterlife for broken lawnmowers and appliances past their prime. Where most of us see junk, Mike Apps of suburban Crestwood sees cash. He spent the past 7 years working as a scrapper, trolling the city and suburban streets and alleys in a beat-up blue pickup truck.
Yeah, I just usually go up and down the blocks, and you kind of go slow and you look around. You know, you see something like this, you just look, see if there's any steel in it sometimes. You know.
This is more than just a scavenger hunt. Mike and other scrappers provide a vital service, picking up junk that garbage trucks won't, stuff that clogs landfills already filled to the brim. Scrappers don't need a special license, just a strong back and a sharp eye for what holds value.
Once you get a feel for it, you know, and what day is what and what garbage day is, it all starts coming real natural. I mean, a lot of people, I've seen women, old men do it. I've seen young kids do it.
Mike once worked as a truck driver until he found he could make more money collecting scrap metal than he did behind the wheel. On this day, he strikes gold in a dumpster in Oak Forest.
Come on in, Ray. The water's fine. It is, yeah. This is a gold. This is a gold mine. I look at it like finding money. It's like dollar bills to me.
The economics are pretty simple. The more valuable metal there is, the more money earned. After loading the pickup, it's time to see if Mike's efforts pay off.
It's a little work, but man, it's all right.
His next stop, a scrapyard in Alsip. First, the weigh-in to find out how much metal he's got. Then the drop-off, unloading his findings onto an enormous pile of debris. Kenny Niebuhr and his wife Nicole run American Scrap Metal. He runs the business like a battlefield general.
Hey, are those signs aluminum or steel? Steel. Those are steel? Yes. All right.
The Niebuhrs started from scratch 6 years ago.
We hauled our old RV right to the scrapyard, and we lived there for about 10 months to a year.
Now it's a multi-million-dollar business. Trucks of all shapes and sizes come and go all day long.
They tore down a garage, and they're bringing me to scrap. They're going to get their money. And this is a lot of money here. You're talking about $400 right here, just in the back of this.
Most of this mountain will eventually be melted down and reused. Some of the most valuable scrap, old copper wires.
They got $100,000 sitting right here. Done. 100 grand.
Meanwhile, the payday for Mike is nowhere near that amount, but he's happy with the result.
And then there's the total right there, $78 for about 2 hours work. And I like that this stuff isn't going into a landfill or something. I'm helping the environment in this way, you know.
And until next week, I'm Chris Beery.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Good night.
Good night.